Sennheiser has made a few popular IEMs in recent history. Their timeless and eternal provide a new planar and dynamic driver perspective and challenge the big-name brands in build, accessories, and sound signature. Now, Sennheiser has released the Legato, a $110 dynamic driver IEM that hopefully offers something unique to the market. The folks at Hi-Fi Go sent me the Legato for review. Hi-Fi Go is among a few retailers that specializes in hi-fi gear. Anything your heart desires can be found at their website. If you're looking to spend a bit of money, check out Hi-Fi Go. Now, on to the Legato. Sennheiser seems to focus their tuning of the Legato in the bass area. They say that this IEM includes a 12mm driver specifically to act as a woofer to produce, quote, powerful lower-end response. The company says that this IEM has a powerful and lively sound. One of the promises is that we should hear, quote, powerful rumble and deep bass extension. Further, Sennheiser claims that the 6mm driver will recreate accurate mid and high frequencies. On the technical side, Sennheiser says they included Japanese capacitors to make sure that each driver gets sufficient current for optimum performance. While the company does not provide a frequency response graph, these are easily available online. These generally indicate a significant bass emphasis, particularly in sub-bass, and an obvious depression in the mid-range. In regards to build, Sennheiser continues its solid construction tactics with the Legato. This IEM has an aluminum case that is smooth to the touch. Gone is the round shape of the timeless and eternal. Instead, the Legato uses a more traditional design, though it is still on the larger side. The Legato is also a fairly heavy IEM comparable to the Moondrop Aria and Starfield. The Legato comes with a typically large 7Hz zipper hardshell case. This is one of the things that the company consistently does really well. The interior is covered in felt lining, and there is plenty of room for the IEMs and its accessories. On that note, the Legato comes with a handful of silicone ear tips and some replacement filters. The cable is soft, pliable, and despite my best efforts to abuse it, transmits very little microphonics. The IEM sits comfortably within my ear, though it does jut out. Assuming you find the proper ear tips, the Legato should sit securely through regular use. I had no trouble wearing this IEM for 3 hours at a time. Overall, the Legato is well made, comes with excellent accessories, is fairly comfortable, and utilizes a simple, clean design. As with all my IEM and headphone reviews, I put the Legato through the same sequence of listening tests as usual. This involved using the Legato with numerous sources, such as my Lotu PAW 6000, iPod Classic 7th Gen, EcoZerta ITM03, and directly plugged into my MacBook Pro M1. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD, lossy files on Spotify, streamed various content including TV shows, movies, and a smorgasbord of music. And the goal, obviously, was to get a fair impression of the sound signature, and to verify Sennheiser's claim that the Legato has deep, powerful bass. I will emphasize that while frequency response graphs are helpful, they're not sufficient in themselves to draw conclusions. This is why listening is important, and when we get to that point, comparing against alternatives. Having said all that, let's just get right into my listening impressions. First and foremost, yes, absolutely, the Legato has a powerful bass response. That sub-bass rumble the company talks about is clearly present. One of my go-to tracks to test the bass is Mountains by Hans Zimmer. This song has a deep rumble from the very beginning, and it is sustained throughout the composition, even while other elements vie for attention. The Legato easily rendered that rumble from the moment the song started. Surprisingly, the bass here was fairly clean and seemed not to overwhelm the mid-bass. When the crescendo hit at the middle of the track, the rumble did not drown out the organ and other details. Bass transients was quicker than what I had expected, and it was about as fast as what I heard on the neutral Moondrop Corks. Drum strikes are hard, impactful, and a little bit sharp. In Conquer by Overwork, the legato rendered every drum hit precisely. When the track starts, there's a rolling marble effect which pans from right to left to center. The legato rendered this detail effortlessly, noticeably clearer than what I heard on the Quarks, Aria, and the Blonde BL03. Similarly, in rap tracks, the legato presented the subwoofer effects without requiring me to significantly increase volume. Sub-bass in these songs was as noticeable as drum hits. However, vocals usually remain clear if shoulder to shoulder with the bass elements. I listen to my Sicario soundtrack as well. I use these songs to determine if I hear any bass distortion. Traversing from low to high gain, the legato never audibly distorted. The mid-range is a little bit recessed. While vocals remain clear and audible, whenever bass is emphasized in the recording, it will sound louder than other elements, including vocalists. In Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This, there is natural vocal grain and sibilance mixed in. Lots of hi-fi IEMs and headphones emphasize both. The legato also presented a marginal emphasis. This was not remotely as harsh as the emphasis you would hear on the HD560S or Blonde IEMs. In fact, the legato's emphasis was only slightly more obvious than what I heard on the neutral Quarks. Orla's voice remained distinct throughout the track, except when drums played a prevalent role. At that point, her voice seemed slightly behind the bass. Similarly, in Want You Back by Haim, the legato marginally emphasized the vocal sibilance. Yet, the IEM was able to keep the multiple vocalists clear and distinct, their voices clearly separated from each other. Each element was audible, though drums and bass were typically the loudest in the mix. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the legato did push the bass ahead of the other initial elements, though all of them remained clear. The primary male vocalist was distinct throughout the track. There's a secondary vocalist who is layered beneath the primary, and most IEMs and headphones fail to reveal this very subtle detail. And the legato could not do it either. Between 1 minute and 10 and 1 minute and 20 seconds, there are sharp intakes of breaths, which the legato presented. The primary male vocalist sibilance was not emphasized and sounded similar to what I heard on the Quarks. The treble is an interesting deviation from what I was expecting. I thought that when 7Hz said the legato is lively, they meant that there is a treble emphasis. That's usually how it goes with those types of descriptions. Yet, the legato does not have an emphatic treble. I almost want to say that the legato's treble sounds neutral, but I don't really think it is. There seems to be a reduction somewhere either in the low or mid treble, and while it is not necessarily a significant deviation, it does become audible upon close examination. In Scherzo for X-Wings, for example, the brass and horns were easily audible. Their nasally signatures were apparent. However, the overall presentation seemed slightly less energetic, less piercing than what I heard on the Quarks. On the other hand, the BL03 has a very piercing rendition, and the legato in comparison sounds much smoother, less piercing. In Flight from the City, the legato rendered the piano and the cello clearly. Both instruments sounded similar to the Quarks. The legato rendered the pops and sizzles and electric buzzing effects in this track. The bassy piano notes seemed more obvious on the legato than on the Quarks. In Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, the legato properly placed each instrument in its respective channel. There was some melding among each, but it was not difficult to hear the various elements. The saxophone and cymbals were louder than the other instruments. However, their energy was noticeably less than what I heard on the BL03 and the Tin Hi-Fi T2. Even the Quark seemed to have a little bit more energy to these elements than the legato. As for soundstage, it seems that the legato has about average width. It sounds about as wide as the Aria, but not as wide as the Tin Hi-Fi T2. It is, however, still a little bit wider than the BL03. The legato's detailability was, surprisingly, fairly good. In my experience, headphones and IEMs that place an emphasis in bass tend to sacrifice detail and clarity. The legato is an outlier in this respect. Pops and sizzles, electric buzzing, twangs of guitar strings, creaking of wood, sharp intakes of breaths, multiple primary vocalists, gravelly natures of voices. These types of details are patently obvious on the legato. However, the IEM does not render minute, subtle details. In my new light listening test, the legato rendered 7 clear footsteps. This places the Legato squarely in the average category, performing similarly to the Aria, Starfield, Quarks, and BL-05S. However, the Tin Hi-Fi T2 sounded clearer overall. Ultimately, I think the Legato has a very interesting tuning. This is a bassy IM, no doubt, but 7Hz was able to tune it so that the bass does not drown out other elements. Vocals remain reasonably obvious, and there is good clarity, or at least no worse than comparative IMs. Treble is on the gentler side, and depending on your preferences, that is either a good or bad thing. I have an opportunity to try many IMs throughout the year, and it can get pretty exhausting. Sometimes it feels like companies are just copying and pasting sound signatures we've heard over and over again. And there's only so much treble I personally can stand, which is not something you get accustomed to if you're not a fan of treble spikes. So when a company like 7Hz steps out to make something different, I'm all for it. And here, with the Legato, I think they did a pretty good job at that. The bass is clearly elevated, and yet not muddy or bloated. Vocals still stand out just enough to provide sufficient context. And treble, thankfully for many people, is slightly reduced, giving a smoother experience. Combine this with only a slight sibilance emphasis, average clarity in soundstage, and good comfort, and you've got an excellent package. I think the 7Hz Legato is indeed value. At just over $100, you get lots to enjoy. The build is great, the accessories are plentiful, the sound signature is fairly unique. What more can you ask for? If this is the kind of sound signature you're interested in, then I think the Legato is a good option to consider. On the other hand, if you're not a fan of bass, or you want more clarity or need more excitement from the treble range, then the Legato might not make you a happy camper. As typical with audiophile gear, your sonic preferences will dictate your perception, and the Legato, I think, will make a good one for many people.